Good morning. I'm glad that you've tuned us in today. It's Monday morning. I hope that you're blessed in the Lord. I wanted to work with you for a few minutes on our devotion for today. Today is my first day back to work after a week of vacation. I preached yesterday at church. You know that if you watched us online or if you were there in the sanctuary. But it has just been a week of trying to clear my head and get a little bit extra rest, but I'm anxious to get back to it today. I hope that, as I mentioned, I hope that you enjoyed the services yesterday. Today's devotion is from Genesis chapter 1 and then one verse over in Genesis chapter 2, and it's titled, Cultivating God's World. Genesis 1, verse 26 and 27. Here's what they say. It's the creation story, so you're really familiar with it. It says, Then God said, Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Then over in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, it says, Then the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. So those are pretty straightforward verses, probably ones that you're very familiar with. A lot of the Christian faith and what we know to be true about God flows out of the creation story. And so today, the devotion, as I mentioned, is titled Cultivating God's World. And the theme of the devotion is about our work, the things that we spend our time and putting our hands to, contributing to the world that God has created. Whether you're a homemaker or retired, or you're right in the throes of your work life outside of the home, this devotion is for you. Here's what it says. It says, Dad, why do you have to go to work? The question from my young daughter was motivated by her desire to play with me. I would have preferred to skip work and spend time with her, but there was a growing list of things at work that required my attention. The question, nevertheless, is a good one. Why do we work? Is it simply to provide ourselves and for ourselves and for the people we love? What about labor that's unpaid? Why do we do that? Genesis 2 tells us that God placed the first human in the garden to work it and take care of it. My father-in-law is a farmer, and he often tells me he farms for the sheer love of land and livestock. That's beautiful, but it leaves lingering questions for those who don't love their work. Why did God put us in a particular place with a particular assignment? Genesis 1 gives us the answer. We're made in God's image to carefully steward the world that He made. Get that? It's very, very, very important. I'll read it again. We're made in God's image to carefully steward the world that He made. We ask ourselves all the time, what's my purpose? What am I here for? What do I do? I can tell you what your purpose is, at least in the general sense, and that is to take care of and to press into, to bless and to cultivate what God has already made. Pagan stories of the way the world began reveal that, quote, God's making humans to be their slaves. Genesis declares that the one true God made humans to be His representatives, to steward what He had made on His behalf. May we reflect His wise and loving order into the world. Work is a call to cultivate God's world for His glory. So there was two questions and then one truth that I want to draw from the devotion. First of all, it starts with this. Why do we work? Why do we work? Well, obviously, part of the reason we work is to earn an income that procures the things that we need, housing, clothing, food. That's true. But sometimes when that's our only purpose in work, it can get a little dry. Work can become just a necessary evil, if you will. It can be something that we do just out of pure need. That's a bad way to live, but I would I would just suggest that if that's the case for you, if your work is not something that you do with a passion, not something that you love, you can still honor God in it. If your work is something that simply garners a wage so that you can have the things that you need, you can still be a witness in that. And even in mundane, laborious work that doesn't stimulate you, you can still let your light so shine before men that they see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So none of us just work. We all have a purpose, whether your work is in the house, raising children, whether your work is on the assembly line at the plant, or whether your work is in the church. And that's the second thing I want to talk about. The question exists, why do we do work that we don't get paid for? And, as a pastor, it's easy for me to automatically connect the dots and position that in the context of the church. And here's the thing, you've heard it said many times that churches struggle to find people to serve. And there's probably a multitude of different reasons for that. But I would just say this, regardless of whether your work is in the church or whether your work is outside the church, it's still for the Lord. Why do we do work that we don't get paid for? Because God sent us to. Why do we get involved in the work of the kingdom? Because that's what God made us to do. That's why we do it. Sometimes it's sweaty, sometimes it's hard, laborious, and sometimes it's just emotionally difficult. When we're involved in service within God's kingdom, in the church and out of the church both, we have to remember that we have been called to do it as unto the Lord, and I hope that you will. And when I was a fairly new pastor, there was a time where Luke was just a little guy. He was this tall. And he and I were very close when he was little, and we were spending some time together. It was nighttime. It was after supper, but not yet bedtime. And he and I were spending time together, and the phone rang, and it was a ministry call. Somebody was calling me as their pastor, and they needed my help, and they needed my help right now. And I had to run off to the hospital to be with one of our church families. And so I quickly grabbed my wallet and my keys and put my shoes on, and Luke says to me exactly what the devotion said, "Daddy, where are you going?" And I said, "Well, Daddy has to leave to go to work for a bit." "Well, can I go with you?" And I knew what I was getting into at the hospital. It was not going to be a pleasant pastoral visit at all. I said, "No, buddy, you can't go where Daddy's going right now." And I remember thinking on my way to the hospital how difficult it must be for him at that young age to understand that I had to go and work. I had to go and be who God called me to be. Not just a father, but to go then and be a pastor. And no doubt that happens in your life as well. Work is what we make of it. When I come home later on that night, I tucked Luke into bed and I told him that I loved him, and we spent a moment in prayer, and he asked me about my visit to the hospital, and I shared with him in kid-appropriate language what had gone on. And I remember thinking, I hope that when my children are grown, that they will understand the importance of God-honoring work as well. God has placed us here to honor Him in work. Now, I want to show you one last little thing. It's a little bit of an illustration that will prove my point here. You see these flowers here. These grow on our back porch at home. Andrea planted them back in late spring, and they did okay. We're really busy, and so we're not always the best gardeners because we're away from home so much. But the flowers did okay. But when summertime came and it got hot and dry, they began to flounder a little bit. And I've taken two different occasions, I've taken a little bit of vacation time. And on the first vacation time that I took back in June, I went to the hardware store and I bought a box of Miracle-Gro, and I started applying Miracle-Gro to these flowers. And they went from being okay to being, lush and big and beautiful. And I thought about this idea of cultivating what God has given us, and I remember that work really is what you make it. You know, the flowers of your life, they can be okay, just okay in your work. Or you can just decide, you can make the choice that you're going to honor God in your work. You're going to do the work of cultivating God's world that He called you to be. I've recently become very aware that so much of life is about decisions. And today I'm deciding, I've just made the choice that today I'm going to be God's man. Today I am going to do my very best work for the Lord. Today, I hope that at the end of the day, my life will be like these flowers. They will, through my work, my life will have gone from being ordinary and just okay to being beautiful for God's honor and glory. Remember, whatever you do, do it as unto the Lord. Mondays are always a challenge, so just make the choice right now that today you're going to honor God in whatever you put your hand to, whatever cultivating work He's given you. God bless you. We'll see you later.